Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, honoured guests, it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce this morning's plenary session, which marks the official opening of the 66th annual meeting of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. I want to extend a special welcome to our international visitors. This year we have 471 delegates to our conference from 58 countries around the world. So please join me in welcoming them to the United States. The purpose of the plenary session is that it's an opening session which serves to focus our attention on a particular issue relevant to our organization's purpose and in which all the members can participate. In fact, we arrange our meeting so that there's nothing running in competition with this session because we want all of our delegates and visitors to be able to attend. This week, we celebrate at our meeting the role of teachers, professors, trainers, mentors, and role models in the forensic sciences, the people they support, and we've adopted as our theme, Forensic Science, Education and Mentorship, Our Path Forward. We, of course, borrow part of that title from that of the 2009 National Academy of Sciences report on strengthening forensic science in the United States, Our Path Forward. And a large portion of the program this week, from the interdisciplinary session to the workshops, special sessions and section events, celebrate the mentorship theme and consider the very important principle of recruiting, preparing and developing new scientists for our laboratories and courtrooms, to educating the legal profession to be smart and ethical users of the tools of forensic science, building bridges between practicing forensic scientists and academics to produce researchers, strategists, managers, and insightful, well-prepared scientists to meet the challenges of the changes coming to our profession. In fact, Recommendation 10 of the National Academy's report addresses this very issue of education and points out that Congress should authorize funds to develop, maintain academic programs in physical and life sciences that are crucial to forensic science, support the research needs and methods that must be stressed in such academic endeavors, and support law school and judicial means of educating budding lawyers, practicing lawyers, and judges in the forensic sciences. And our theme here this week is intended to do something to support that particular recommendation. But the focus of our plenary session here this morning is broader than just Recommendation 10. As this year marks the 5th anniversary of the release of the National Academy's report, it seemed to me an appropriate time to reflect and evaluate how the landscape of forensic science has changed in the last 5 years. And I invited Dr. Laura Liptai, who you just heard from, and her co-chair, Ms. Susan Ballou, to put together a program to explore 4 aspects of forensic science practice that were highlighted in the National Academy's report. Those are education, which clearly is linked to this year's overall meeting theme, certification of forensic specialists, accreditation of forensic facilities and laboratories, and research and validation in forensic science. Laura and Sue further developed the content for this morning's program by reaching out to 2 organizations cited in the NAS report for their perspective on 2 of these areas. And we're honored to have with us this morning Mr. Andrew Renison, the Forensic Science Regulator for the United Kingdom, and Mr. Alistair Ross, Executive Director of the Australian National Institute for Forensic Science. We also have on our panel 2 distinguished members of our own academy, Mr. Derek Hammond, President of the Forensic Specialties Accreditation Board, an organization sponsored by AAFS and whose activities are probably not well known to many of our membership, but an organization which is responsible for guiding much of the progress that has been made to date in setting standards for certification of individual forensic science practitioners in the United States. Our 4th panelist, Mr. Tim Palmbach, the outgoing chair of the Forensic Science Education Programs Accreditation Commission, an organization also sponsored by the AAFS that has done much to drive the content and quality of forensic science graduate and undergraduate education in the United States. Additionally, to conclude our program this morning, we've been able to add at a very late date, really breaking news, introductions to 2 key individuals recently appointed to lead the federal government's initiatives in promoting standardization and governance of forensic science within federal government laboratories and across our profession, by leadership and engagement. It's our pleasure at the conclusion of the program this morning to be able to introduce Mr. Nelson Santos, Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Office of Forensic Sciences at the Drug Enforcement Administration, and Dr. John Butler, Special Assistant to the NIST Director for Forensic Science, Vice Chairs of the National Commission on Forensic Science. So this morning's session is not a pat on the back or any claim that as an organization or as a profession that we've addressed all the issues in the NES report, or that we've even begun to address many of them. Certainly the NES report will not turn out to be the last word in the future of the forensic sciences, but it was definitely the opening remarks, and we must plan our future with that in mind. So I want to conclude my remarks by again thanking Laura Liptai and Sue Ballou for their work in compiling the program. And it's my pleasure to announce the 66th annual meeting of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences open and return you to the chair of this morning's program, Sue Ballou. Thank you.
Thank you. And as Dr. Logan had already mentioned and did a wonderful job of introducing our speakers this morning, I'd like to allow Professor Timothy Palmbach to come up front and start our session.
Thank you. Good morning. Amazing you all dragged yourself out of bed here. I think this is one of those meetings where the adults do a little bit better than the students for whatever precarious reason that is. So this is my talks on the standard part of it, and also looking at the next generation. And by next generation, no, this is not a DNA talk. I know frequently you all think that it's certainly in the world of funding you get more attention, but this is a FEPAC talk. Maybe we could get a little more funding. I don't know who I can make that appeal to. So what are the essential elements of forensic science and education? This is nothing new, by the way. This is not groundbreaking. We didn't need the NES report to tell us this. Twig Ed first talked about it, and frankly, these have been the issues in our community forever. They're going to be our ongoing issues. Ethical, practical considerations. I wish ethics didn't need to be talked about. It seems like, you watch somebody make that really stupid move, and we publicly deal with them well as an academy, and we assume that we'll just learn and move on, and yet they seem to come back. And so, very frustratingly, ethics is always going to be a serious part of our curriculum. Scientific methodology has got to be the core element, and tied to that is research, and we'll talk, all the speakers here today will talk about that. That was one of the knocks of the NIST report. One of the criticisms is you guys aren't real scientists, you don't really, follow true methodology, and you don't have the inherent respect of the biology and medical and chemistry communities, and most of us will push back and say, well, we do and we should, but it's our onus to prove it, and to start proving it within the academic community, by the way we instruct our students, by what we expect them to accomplish, and the skills that we expect them to leave with. Obviously, we have statistical issues coming up in probability, and how do we talk about our analysis. Great criticisms coming forth out of NES, and certainly things that the academic world is trying to fix. It's not all that easy to do. And we'll talk about research as we go, because I think there's a lot to say about that. Some of the NIST reports, they say that there was a really big need for critical improvement. I would almost take umbrage with that. I think they went too far with that. I think we were doing a pretty good job 5 years ago. Certainly room for improvement, but very much thanks to the early Twig Ed group and the early FEPAC group and ABC and all these other groups that you're going to talk about what they've done to promote good quality product and curriculum. I think we have more to be proud of than we should not worry about. The second point there is, and I think we had an A for this, is can we draw and bring into our community the really bright upcoming science-based students? And I think we have done a great job with that. I know, looking at my students, I couldn't be prouder, and often I look at the students I didn't get because they went to other institutions, so I know they're also having tremendous students. We have done a great job of bringing really, really intelligent young people into this community. And so we get an A+ in that area as far as I'm concerned. And research, again, something that we'll need to push forward with, and we're going to continue to do that. Quick history. This may have helped the quiz, I think, Al, so I don't know. I was looking at that Academy quiz going, man, I don't know as much as I probably should know. But yeah, the quick history of FEPAC is the first report from NIJ came out in 1999 saying we got some needs for sure. The next response was to form a technical working group, the Twig Ed group, and they did a lot. They really did a wonderful job, and they laid down this framework of this is what curriculum should look like. Early on, one of the great things they did was they took the practitioners and the educators and they brought them together, and they said, you know, let's not just build a curriculum in an academic silo. Let's talk to the practitioners. What is it that you would like a graduate to come with? What are the skill sets you'd like them to do? And so that began to set the foundation. By 2002, FEPAC was up and running as an ad hoc group coming out of the American Academy. By 2003, we're actually starting our accreditation process, and we're now 11 years into it. We have, I think, nearly 40 programs that are accredited, 47, I think is the magic number, that are accredited. For those programs that are not accredited, let's go. I know it's hard. We'll all work with you. We want you to become accredited. We are looking for success. It is a really important criteria, something for you to strive for. So really, please make it happen. And then FEPAC, as an organization, we practiced what we preach. We put ourselves under the grind. Our first step was to become ASPA accredited, and then secondly, we became CHIA recognized. And CHIA is that big umbrella in DC that oversees all your regional academic accreditations. They're the big watchdog. Anything that's academic, they have the final say as to whether or not the accrediting bodies are doing their job correctly and they're outcome-based. And so us getting over that hurdle really was a final stamp of approval that what FEPAC's doing is relevant, it's legitimate, it's respected by the academic community. For those of you who are trying to convince your deans and your college boards that you should seek accreditation and it's worth the funding, it's worth the extra line items, go back and say this is really legitimate. You know, they'll be part of CHIA, they understand what CHIA is. I believe, and I might get in trouble for saying this, and I know the constitutionalists have this argument, is it really a living, breathing document or a founding father document? And we can get into political trouble here quickly, but I believe, as far as FEPAC and standards go, we have that fine line of really being consistent and understanding what our roots were, as well as being reflective to the changing needs within our field, and therefore evolving them as we need. And we've been as careful as we can be at FEPAC to make standard changes only when they're necessary, only after very good public input and comment, and then be very clear about what we're trying to do. And examples being, you know, the graduate curriculum. You know, people would say, well, you have this pick list of ethics and courtroom testimony and professional practice, and how much do you really want us to teach that? And we've gotten better at saying, we'll tell you how much we want you to teach that and why we think it's important. And the program directors have been wonderful in making those changes for us. Frankly, we've upped the caliber or requirements for faculty and program directors. Bottom line is students learn under the direction of leadership. They learn under the direction of faculty. And if we don't set a high enough bar, how can we expect them to excel? So we have pushed that up. I'm proud to say that the programs that are accredited really now can boast the reality that they do have solid faculty. So let's talk about research from an academic point of view. You know, before we start this, there is some push on this, and I understand that. You know, we had our lab directors meeting just the other day in FEPAC. Some of them pushed back and says, you know, with all due respect, we just want students that show up, can do the job, are properly trained, and we really don't want them to arrive thinking that, you know, they can have a 2-hour lunch break and spend 3 hours in the afternoon pontificating the next great research project. And I said, I swear we're not telling them that in academic programs. So on the outside chance you are, that's not true. So the students, guess what? When you get to that lab job, that first lab job, you really are going to be on the bench with a heavy caseload, grinding through and doing what you need to do. However, I do believe you can. You have weekends, you have nights. You know, there's more to your life. Most of us give that up, have we not? You don't need to give research up. You can continue to push forward and be passionate about that. And I also believe firmly, as we put our graduates out into the community, and I'll challenge a lab director, wouldn't you appreciate a student who had those analytical, critical thinking skills? You know, when the column goes down or some little problem with your microscope goes out of balance, do you really want to call the tech company, and I'm sure they would say yes because they want their money. Or would you like the capacity for your students to think a little bit and solve some of these problems themselves? That's what we're trying to create when we're doing this. There's no inherent mandate for research at the undergraduate level, although we strongly encourage it. There is a mandate for it at the graduate level, and we are really looking for thesis quality work, and we're really ultimately asking for a partnership between academia and the practitioners to do the relevant research together and to make our students part of that process. So research, it can be good, it can be bad, it can fail, it can succeed. This is one that I particularly love. It basically says, I think it's a great final thesis statement here, is that if you drink a lot, it's just because you're frankly smart. And so this is our justification for the older crowd, why we drink as much. For the younger crowd, you're frankly smart enough. Many of you are too smart. Don't drink as much. Back to ethics. Another interesting little segue of research. Maybe we're not teaching ethics right. If you look at this study, it says that there's a 50% greater probability that they'll steal the textbooks if they're ethics students. Very strange. Maybe they really care so deeply about ethics they can't part without them. I'm not sure. I guess the challenge again for us is, are we teaching ethics correctly to begin with? Are the right texts out there? How do we maybe do a better job of that? And that's a challenge maybe I'll leave today with, can we do a better job with that? And for the psychiatry side of our house here, and your problem of having to deal with the issue of conceptual and cognitive biases, real critical issues in forensic sciences, this is an interesting one. If you're ambidextrous, you're more prone to these kinds of emotional drawings. So lab directors, maybe you need to add this right behind the polygraph exam and say no to all ambidextrous employees. Students, if you're ambidextrous, it's probably a good idea not to let them know that. Research, and let me just say, for those of you who are on the other side saying, do we really need research, and you guys are pushing it too much, for my generation, now this is going to make us feel a little bit older than we want to, for the students, you're now going to look at us as even more out of it and dinosaurs, but this is the reality. When we were coming through the program, yes, Watson and Crick's had their little thing out there, but Alex Jeffrey hadn't done his thing, and DNA was not in existence. We did these basic cellular groupings and group 1, group 2, forensic serology, immunology terms you have no right. Designer drugs meant that you had marijuana in your blue jeans. We had no concept of what ecstasy, spice, cat, and all this would be. The whole concept of internet, it was pre-internet. I know it has not been around forever, but yes, we all lived in the pre-internet world, and many of you as well. And just think about how that's dramatically changed things. Our database systems in our laboratory, they weren't there. Our bottom line as a forensic lab community was basically you had to give us the name of a suspect, and we would tell you that's a good suspect, that's not a good suspect, and move on. The concept of us being in the front end and having databases to deal with, it didn't exist. So, I mean, dramatic changes. Crime scene technology, things like alternate light sources, portable instrumentation, digital cameras, boy, what a revolution that became. All of that's new to us. So where do we need to have areas of research from the academic point of view? Yes, there's going to be new methods that we have to validate and deal with. Yes, there's going to be a lot of research necessary to talk about what the different limits are, what are the statistical and probability implications. Very much true for the subjective disciplines, for the pattern-based disciplines. I think NES had good ground there to tell us, you got to figure this out. You got to figure out how to do things better. And they did correctly hold DNA up very much as a gold standard and said, to the extent possible, although in a lot of areas it's not, follow their lead. New technologies would come out. This is my push for rapid. Why do I love rapid DNA? And this is my coming out. As a crime scene pattern guy, it is a humiliating moment for me to come here and speak so proudly of DNA technologies. If I feel like I've jumped ship here, I apologize. But it's been great, and I'll tell you what, I've done a year-long sabbatical of trying to figure out how we can use DNA technologies, mainly rapid technologies, in the war against human trafficking. So for me, it was, wow, this is really great to pull all these pieces together. But whatever the technology is, keep in mind, as a community, we need validation, we need concordance studies, we need to develop specific methodologies for using these technologies within our disciplines. And where better to find those resources and assistance as a lab when you're already overworked than within an academic community and with students. So please keep that in mind. There's also a mandate for us as FEPAC accredited programs to have interactions with laboratories. It's not a should, it's a shall. So this is my challenge to the program directors. Please find programs to engage with. I know it can seem like a pain in the neck, but those internship projects, those research projects, those positions on advisory boards, they have to do it. We are begging you to participate. And for those lab directors that actually do it quite well, thank you. And I know every program up here would say thank you for doing that. Research can also be extremely fun. I gave you some crazy stuff. You know, this goes back to some early stuff we did in the 80s in Connecticut. We had that famous wood chipper case, divorce Connecticut style, throw your way through it, right? Not a great outcome, but an interesting case. But whoever thought about having to look at bone fragments and wood fragments and determine whether or not a particular body came through a wood chipper, and so you got to do very cool things like throw pigs through wood chippers and see what happens. And no, you will not see the resulting slide. I had it in there, I'm going, yeah, no, this is almost a breakfast meeting. Yeah, so I cleaned it up a little bit, I'm sorry, but it was really cool. Digital, the whole world of digital evidence is you know, DE section's brand new here. I frankly know very little about it, but I do know this. It's growing, it's blossoming. The need for accreditation is huge. Please, within the DE community, let's start getting some programs accredited. And there's just a tremendous amount of research there as well. There may be a need for us to have new disciplines, and so I'm going to push back to you and say, as a FEPAC, are there areas that we should be looking at to expand our scope of accreditation? Think very carefully about it. Think about the work that's involved in it. You'll be seeing a survey coming out of FEPAC very soon. We ask you to pay attention to it, read it, and inform us. Lastly, the issues that we will likely look at in the future, no surprise. Certification, next up, is going to be an issue. Distance learning, how do we do distance learning in the world of forensic science? Some of it's appropriate, a lot of it's not. A lot of our basic skills are lab-based, so we're really going to be in that yin and yang and struggle of figuring out, as distance learning becomes a greater part of the academic world, how we in forensic sciences allow for it where it's appropriate and don't allow for it where it's not appropriate. Lastly, we are a global community. You heard President Logan speak about it this morning. We need to think globally. We need to have meetings like this. We have to look at using our skill sets to solve problems in other parts of the world that are less fortunate, less skilled. We really have to partner and get out there and solve. For me, it was the issue of human trafficking. There are many other issues that require our attention. So, thank you very much. There will be a Q&A session as we conclude, and it was my pleasure.